Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Libertas International podcast. I'm your host, at least for this week, Tyler Schwab, founder of Libertas International, and I'm super happy to welcome back the Children's International Rescue Foundation back to the podcast. These guys are great. Worked with these guys for a long time. And I'm glad that they continue to come on and share their story about intervention work, investigation work. It's such important work, and I'm happy to give them this platform and to chat and see how we can collaborate together. And I'm really, last time that we had Alex Dorelli on. Alex is one of the co-founders of S.W.A.T, as it's called. And I'm happy to welcome back Walt, who is another founder of the group. And Walt, I'm super excited to have him on. He's worked investigating human trafficking for a long time in places like the Northern Triangle. He's lived down in Ecuador. He's a current police officer here in Utah, where he lives. He's been a S.W.A.T officer. He's worked for the U.S. Marshal Task Force, the U.S. Marines. He speaks 3 languages, and I'm just really excited to have him on and have him talk about the work that they're doing, that they're engaged in, some of the pitfalls, some of the pros and the cons of what supporting on the investigation end looks like. And so, without further ado, I'm happy to welcome Walt on the Libertas International podcast, and I hope you enjoy his interview. All right, welcome back to the show. Happy to have Walt on here. Walt, I didn't use your last name because I don't know how to spell it or how to say it correctly.
No, and fine. Just Walt is fine.
Okay, and that's how you were named on the website, so I didn't know if you wanted your last name out there. But
just Walt is great.
I'm super happy to have you on the pod. Alex was here. He gave a great interview a couple weeks back, and we're big fans of what you guys do over at the Children's International Rescue Foundation. And so I'm happy to have the Director of Operations and a co-founder of S.W.A.T here on this podcast. So, Walt, tell me about you. Tell me about your story. Tell me about what makes Walt tick.
No, thanks. First of all, thank you, Tyler, for the invitation to come on. Just grateful for the opportunity to talk a little bit about human trafficking and how we got into this and what we're doing to try and help this complex problem that seems to be plaguing the world. I initially got recruited into this line of work as a law enforcement officer. I'm a police officer, and I speak Spanish, I speak Portuguese, and a large organization that was involved in anti-human trafficking approached me and asked if I'd be willing to help go down to Colombia and help them on a case that they were involved with the Colombian National Police. So I jumped on a plane, went down there, went to Colombia for the first time.
Where'd you go? Which city?
I was in Medellin.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it was a big case. It was a transnational case. Organized crime, involved a lot of different suspects, and there was a bunch of different kids getting trafficked internationally. And I had the opportunity to learn how they conduct those investigations. Spent time with victims, spent time with traffickers, spent time doing surveillance, collecting evidence for them. And then it was just really neat, after it was all over, to see, I think it was President Duque that actually even announced the operation, the conclusion, and all the arrests. It was on national TV, and I was like, wow, this is cool. Like, we're making a difference. And I have a background, too, in S.W.A.T and with the U.S. Marshals. And one of the primary things they teach you in S.W.A.T is the priority of life. And children are at the very top. You get like a barricade situation or a hostage situation, children are number one. Like, those are the lives that come before anybody else's that you're trying to save. And this line of work, it involved, helping children out of these difficult situations. And so I just kind of gravitated toward that same type of priority of life mindset, that these are the most important missions that you can be involved in the world. So I'm really passionate about it and just doing what we can to help out.
That's awesome, man. Thanks for all you do, and curious to know which case that you work now, because it's I may have a few survivors on our caseload from that case. But what year was that? Was that 2019?
2018, I think.
2018?
Yeah. It may have gotten wrapped up in 2019. I can't remember. Okay. In that time frame. Yeah.
Well, you kind of answered my second question for you too. Is like, how did you get involved in the fight against human trafficking? It sounds like you were recruited into that. I'm assuming it was Alex that reached out to you and recruited you in. Mm-hmm. That's cool. So, for your role with SURF, what is your role as director of operations? What does that look like? And when it, there's talk in the news now with so many different rescue organizations out there of what actually can rescue organizations do, intervention organizations. And the Exodus Road recently published something on their Instagram, which I thought was very insightful and very helpful. Of they don't arrest anybody, that they empower law enforcement to do their job in a more effective way, confirm evidence. So I'm just curious I really appreciated their post. I feel like it got rid of a lot of misconceptions of what rescue organizations can and can't do legally. And so I'd love to hear it from you of what does your role look like as the director of operations for SURF, and what does your role look like with law enforcement? Where does it stop? Where does it end? And how do you empower them to do their job better?
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. My primary responsibility is maintaining and building relationships with these law enforcement partners that we have in the host nations that we work in. So, yeah, we don't do any work on our own without the authorization, the blessing of the government, of the national police forces, of the prosecutors in those countries. So it's very important that we maintain those relationships, and that's kind of primarily what I do, supporting them in their cases, finding out what they need, what kind of resources they need to complete their cases. And so from start to finish, I guess, they reach out, they run into a case where they need some help on. They may need additional manpower. They may need surveillance equipment. They may need specialists who are in human intelligence gathering. They may need analysts that can conduct open source intelligence investigations to try and find out who people are, what they're driving, their social media networks that they're using, the establishments that they're frequenting, all this type of information. I don't want to get too much into detail how we collect that information, because for safety reasons it's important that we maintain some operational security on how we help them. But in a nutshell, that's kind of what we do.
I love the intelligence, especially the online stuff, is super helpful to me, because that's kind of where we go right away too. When a girl comes to us and starts naming names, specifically of American perpetrators, the first place we go is online to find out where exactly they're from, which Homeland Security office might want to take ownership of the case, and then which airport they're most likely flying from. If you have a guy from Miami, he's probably taking that American Airlines flight that flies direct to Medellin, or if they're in Atlanta, they could be flying anywhere in the world. So I know you guys are very well respected. Me and Alex have talked about this on a couple different occasions, of the medal that he got a few years back, and then how you guys were awarded the Corazon Verde. Is that what it was? Case of the year?
Yes.
And how that, I know you guys are actively seeking that, because I know you guys is hard and all that stuff. But on the other end, I believe it does validate some of the work that you guys are doing. And so what does it mean for you guys to receive those kind of recognitions, to where a case that you helped further along, a case that you helped finish, was voted the best case of the year that year in Colombia specifically?
Like you said, we're not seeking out awards or recognition or anything, but this is a crime that's fairly well hidden in the world. It's difficult to break into these organizations. They're difficult to investigate. And it's hard sometimes to kind of judge, I guess, the impact you're having in a country. So receiving those awards sometimes does just give you some credibility and help give you some positive outlook on, hey, we are making a difference. We are helping the government and these police agencies to complete their cases. So it's rewarding in that respect.
So, with that case, and I'm sure a lot of the other cases, you have to go undercover. What is that like to... Somebody asked me this today on the radio station of, do I ever get to, on my end, talk with the traffickers, talk with the bad guys, see the bad guys? And I answered them, no. From like an aftercare standpoint, when I get to see these guys is usually they're American men, and it's right before the judge hands them a sentence. And I'll get to see them, and I'll get to talk at them by reading a victim statement to them. But I don't get to interact with them much, thank God. And so I'm curious to you, with my role and your role are almost the exact opposite, to where you may get to know these guys very intimately, and these women. There are a lot of women traffickers as well. In fact, in 2020, the majority of my cases came from female traffickers. But I imagine you get to know them pretty well, get to know their kids, where they're from, their story. What is it like to get to know these bad guys? And when it's all done, how do you, I guess, clear your head and make yourself, like, just shake it off, make yourself feel clean again after having to interact with these bad guys for such a long amount of time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Undercover work, it's almost like an acting job. The best operators in this type of environment are guys who are good actors and good communicators and people who can quickly develop relationships with people. So they're good conversationalists, you know. They have varied backgrounds and are able to relate to all different kinds of people in different situations. They can even relate to criminals and, you know, and things of that nature. So, yeah, we do get close to these criminals, these traffickers. We get close to the victims, talking to them. That's how you build trust with people in order to gain the evidence that you need for the prosecutions. We've had operators who have the traffickers have made them, you know, godfather of their children. Who have... I
didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So we've got some really good guys that are just really good at gathering intelligence and getting close to people. That's how you gather intelligence. You get close to someone. And you do that, you know, just by being a good person, relating to them, conversations with them when possible. And then coming back, like you said, you need to take some time to decompress, get out of that role. It's important that our operators take a long break in between missions, because if you start doing those back to back to back, you know, you're in that acting role constantly, that you can assimilate that role permanently, and it can mess some people up. We have had guys that have had some psychological difficulties from operations they've been out on. So that is a concern. And what else?
I think I think you covered it, of just these bad guys being good actors and not, you know, I've seen, obviously working with you guys, seeing you guys in action, it's made me appreciate what a good operator looks like, because I've also seen the back end where I've seen these people that go on these operations and they dress up like they're like at a 70s dance party, like these flashy clothes. They dye their hair, they go into these brothels and become the center of attention.
Yes.
And from what I understood is that's not the way to do it, where you almost at best a gray man, where a lot of people might not know if you were there or if you were there, because you blend in so well.
Yeah, in those type of environments too, it's just safer to blend in. Some of the areas that we go into, they're pretty hot areas, controlled by criminals. There's often, you know, a lot of addicts in the area, a lot of violence, gang violence. not areas you want to stand out in. You hear, in the media and in popular films and things like that. You don't need tattoos. You don't need wigs. You don't need elaborate undercover stories. You just you're in an acting role. You just be yourself as much as you can. Because people are smart. They see through fakeness. They see through falseness. So it's best just to play a role that's you, but just a little different than you, to gain that trust.
So tell me about SURF. How it was founded, why it was founded, and where do you guys work? Tell me about everything that if someone's going to listen to this podcast and they're only going to listen to this section, 20 minutes in, what is SURF? Why does it matter? Who are the people running it? And where do you guys, are you actively working across the world?
Yeah, great question. So there's a couple of us that founded SURF that came from other nonprofits doing anti-human trafficking. And, well, frankly, we were just tired of nonprofits that were more focused on fundraising and fame and raising awareness, where we wanted to focus actually on the operations and, just keeping it clean, using donor money for what it's meant to be used for, to help those kids in the field and to arrest traffickers. We started the organization about 3 years ago, and we've been working to just build and maintain those relationships with our police partners to continue to do operations. What makes us different, I guess, than other nonprofits in the same space is none of us have any salaries. We have a very humble operator pay for guys when they're in the field. Actually, on an operation is the only time you ever would get paid. Even myself as operations director, doing all this work on the back end, maintaining relationships with our partners, building operation plans, doing all the travel and logistics. I don't get paid for any of that. It's all service, and that's kind of how we want to keep it, just to keep our focus and our hearts pure on the mission, to try not get involved in greed, or fame, or any of those things that can get in the way in this type of business. We primarily have been working in Colombia. Most of our operations are out of Colombia. Most of our relationships are in Colombia. And I have thought a lot about that and studied that. Why is there such a big human trafficking crisis and problem in Colombia? And just looking at the region, like if we pull back and take like a 30,000 foot view over the territory, Colombia is an amazing country strategically for criminals. It borders 5 different countries. You got Panama in the north. You've got Ecuador, Peru, and Brazil in the south. You've got Venezuela in the east. And these are very jungled, rough terrain borders. They're very porous borders. Colombia is unique also in that it has access to the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. You have access to both oceans.
Yeah, talk about this. Yeah, keep spitting.
It's strategically, so this is prime real estate for criminals and transnational criminal organizations for drug trafficking. And that's part of the reason why it's had such a long history of conflict with cocaine, with confrontations between extremist liberals, extremist conservatives, vying for control over this country that's really special in a lot of ways. It's beautiful. It also has there's 3 giant mountain ranges that just traverse the country. It's rough terrain. You've spent a lot of time there.
Yes,
You gotta fly basically anywhere. There's airports all over the place because it is.
So you
rugged
fly, or you
terrain.
spend 16 hours in a car just to get from one city to the next.
So also with those mountain ranges and the jungle, you look at that and it creates these amazing spaces for criminals to hide, to grow illicit crops, to move people, weapons, drugs, and all those types of contraband. So it's just an amazing place, and I'm not knocking it. Like, it's beautiful. I love it. I love Colombia. I love the people there. I love the culture. But just because of where it's situated, it kind of, for criminals, it's amazing real estate for them to operate in. So we spent a lot of time there. And then, on top of that, you have Venezuela, right, on the eastern border, and their recent economic collapse. You have a massive, one of the biggest refugee crises in the world, where people are just fleeing, and so that creates opportunities for them as well, with the smuggling routes to profit from people.
Well, that's you may bring up some interesting points where, for one, I'm super excited for other countries to also receive what SURF can offer. Before the show started, we talked about some expansion opportunities, and I know that there's a really cool opportunity that I won't share in the pod, obviously, but I'm excited for other countries to also benefit from the stuff that you guys offer. And two, just your recent cases. You mentioned, I think, on your website, people go to the Children's International Rescue Foundation.org. You'll see that you guys just did a case involving someone who was exploited by El Tren de Aragua, that Venezuelan gang. And I bring this up because the survivors that are supported by Libertas International, we only have 2 that have any kind of involvement in organized crime. We have a very brave 20-year-old survivor who was trafficked by the ELN, and she's in safe housing in a different part of the city. We're supporting her and her daughter. And a very sweet 16-year-old girl who was trafficked by Clan de Golfo, a narco gang based in Colombia. And other than that, those are the only 2 survivors that we have that have had experience with organized crime. Most of the survivors that come to us are trafficked by family or by American men. I would say 95% of our population kind of fits into that profile. But those 2 that I'm thinking of off the top of my head have suffered abuse that I don't even know if I could put on the podcast without Apple taking it down. Just horrific abuse by the hands of these organized criminals. And you guys, it seems like those have been a lot of your cases in the last couple of years, or maybe last year, if I'm not mistaken. Specifically, the one I'm talking about is the one with El Tren de Aragua. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that's like, working against organized crime, and why you seem to be coming up so much against groups like that with your work?
Sure. First of all, just so everybody knows, we're not developing these leads. We're not initiating these cases. So we are kind of at the mercy of the national police forces and host countries of what they need to help us investigate. So we're not actively seeking, specific gangs or specific organized crime groups to investigate. We're receiving requests for assistance from the Colombian National Police, the Ecuador National Police, to help them with the case. So it may be a sign that these governments are more actively seeking these types of high-level criminals and gangs to take them down. But you're right, we have been running a couple times we have been running into this gang that you just mentioned, Tren de Aragua. And Tren de Aragua is a Venezuelan prison gang. And because of the economic collapse of Venezuela, it's created a lot of opportunities for them for expansion, for growth in the drug trade and human trafficking. We're running into more and more victims that have been trafficked by Tren de Aragua transnationally to other countries, especially Peru. Lima seems to be a hot spot for them where they're operating right now. But like you said also, the majority of human trafficking that we're seeing, or the trends that we're seeing, aren't like you see in the movies or portrayed by even officials of governments. You know, human trafficking is controlled by these large cartels. We're not seeing that. We're seeing most trafficking is smaller clan-like organizations, like you said. They're family-run businesses, or they are just local criminal operators, friends who work together to traffic kids and people. They are, from our interviews with victims in the field and with traffickers in the field, they are sourcing some of these victims from the larger cartel organizations that are involved in human smuggling at the borders. And those cartels will tax some of these smaller local operators and organizations like brothels, strip clubs, bars, smaller groups that are trafficking, on the streets. They will tax them. But yeah, like you said, it's these smaller organizations, families that are trafficking kids.
So, in your work, if you can share, if you can't share, then feel free to just say pass. But what is probably the most dangerous situation you've been in working with surf?
So recently I left.
Oh, recently? Or does this happen recently?
I've only been involved in this work for 5 years now, I think.
That's true.
So everything's pretty recent. I'm still a newbie at this.
That's true.
You're the pro. You know much more.
You are the OG, my man.
More than I do, but I do have a little experience in the field. And recently I did leave the police force to work full-time, to do this full-time in South America and get this nonprofit up and running, kind of get it up on its feet and develop some strong relationships. I moved to Ecuador and was working with the Guayaquil National Police, with the Ecuador National Police in Guayaquil, which is a major hub for cocaine. It's a major cocaine route into the Pacific to come up to the U.S. There's a lot of dangerous gangs there, and I was working with them. And these guys also round up sicarios, and some really dangerous people. And so I had the opportunity to help them with a few cases there, which put me into some very precarious situations, I guess, and dangerous situations. But I believe God is heavily involved in this work. I felt protected. I felt His hand watching over me, and I have a strong faith that God is on our side in this fight against evil.
That was actually one of my questions too. Is like your move to Ecuador and just your work down there, and it's. I mean, you answered it. It sounds like it was a good start as far as like helping build relationships, helping build surf. And you talked, one of the main themes of like our podcast today is you talk about international relationships with your police partners, and like working in this field, like I get a lot of people that are like, the police are all corrupt that you work with. I get some that, I heard an international organization once say something that I strongly disagree with, and I let him know in the moment where he was like, we talked about working with local police, and he said, they need us, we don't need them. And I am 100% disagreement with him on that. I think without them, you have no buy-in from local government, you do not create sustainable change, you at best put these guys right back on the street. You're throwing money down the drain. If these countries are going to change, it's going to change from locals, not from white foreign NGOs that come in and say things like, you need us, we don't need you. And for nonprofits that are results driven, you don't get results unless you have the buy-in from the local governments. And so one thing that I appreciate about your conversation is just this man that I spoke with, who I disagreed with, your attitude is the exact opposite. It seems like, obviously I'll let you speak for yourself here in a second. But so my question, I guess, is like international relationships. What does that look like? Why is that so important to you? And you've spoken very highly of your law enforcement partners, and we do the same thing. We do this thing every year where we have this big, we call it a family dinner, where we invite survivors, we invite police, we invite fiscales, and we all just share a meal together at a finca, just so we can all enjoy each other's company. And because the fiscales do stuff that the police can't do, we do things that neither can do, but they also both do things that we can't do. And so how do you honor your police partners in the work that you do, and why are those international relationships so important to the work that you guys are trying to accomplish?
Yeah, thank you. I'll just try to take a jab at that initial corruption piece. I mentioned that these large cartels tax these smaller local operators trafficking kids. Also, these local police will tax brothels, tax strip clubs, tax bars to turn a blind eye to what's going on. I've seen that firsthand in surveillance. I've seen cops roll up and tax traffickers. And so it's super important in our investigations. They're very compartmentalized. We work with specialized units with the national police of these countries, and they don't tell the local police, that they're conducting an investigation in their jurisdiction for those very reasons. And then on the relationship portion, yes, we have very close relationships with the police when we're down there. We meet with their families, we're familiar with their kids, with their wives. We have meals, like you said, with them. We have dinner with them. I know when a lot of the girls, their kids' birthdays are, we bring down presents. It's a tight-knit, trustworthy group of people that we work with. But we do have to be very cautious outside of that because of the high amount of corruption, which is unfortunate.
Last question, bro. You said you're a newbie. You've been doing this for 5 years now? 3 years? 4 years? 5 years. So is there a case that has most impacted you, but that you have worked in, maybe you have one like the top of your head or maybe you don't, but people ask me this all the time of is there a case that has most impacted you? And I say yes, and I also say I don't know. But my yes answer is probably the first case I've ever had where I came across an American citizen. That's one that impacted me because it was the start of the journey that I've been on since. But also, that changes every single week because new cases come every single week. From the aftercare side, that's how I would frame it from the aftercare side. From the operation side, is there a case that you're most proud of or that's most affected you or that was hardest? I'll put the ball in your court to talk about the case that you're thinking of, but tell us about a case that has impacted you in some way.
The first case that comes to mind it's actually a conversation that came to mind that I had with a young girl who was being trafficked, and I was in the field collecting evidence, and I had earned enough trust from her that she just broke down in tears and wanted to tell me her story of what actually was going on and who she was. And she was about 12 years old. She was in an abusive relationship where her father was physically abusing her. The family was very poor, dire economic circumstances. And so they basically sold her to be a sexual companion to her mother's boss at that very young age. And that's where a lot of her trauma really started. And then from there, she got to a point where she couldn't take that anymore. She was about 14. And she saw an advertisement to be a model in Peru. And so she thought, this is my chance. I'm going to run away from this life of abuse. And so she answered the ad and received a bus fare to go to Peru. She gets down to the border, and it's Tren de Aragua that meets her there, and they lock her in a room in Lima, keep her locked up for 3 months while they are sex trafficking her on the streets to pay off her incurred debt. And then she gets pregnant while she's being trafficked by Tren de Aragua. And so after 3 months, she's pregnant now. They say she's paid off her debt, and they release her. She is able to make it back to her home in Colombia and is rejected now by her family because she's pregnant and she ran away. Tren de Aragua had provided her a Venezuelan ID to show that she was an adult. And she now has an infant to take care of, and she's homeless. And so she feels her only option now is to use that Venezuelan ID that shows she's an adult to continue working in a local brothel. And they began controlling her, manipulating her in the same way that the gang was doing in Peru. Sorry, super emotional.
No, man.
But
keep going.
So you see some horrible things like that and hear some horrible stories. It's just sad. And so we're just doing what we can, just plugging away with the donations that we received to be able to try and help these kids.
One thing that I really appreciate about SURF is that you guys look to do it right. You guys look to invest in local partners. You guys really care about the victims that you're interacting with, so that the police have everything that they need to benefit from your service and are not hindered by your service to get these guys in cuffs and to get a solid prosecution. It's something I've always respected about you guys and your background in law enforcement, your respect with local partners, and you guys will never do more or less than what's asked of you by local law enforcement. I feel like that's a way that you guys respect law enforcement and ensure that that these cases and these that they get the quality of care that they need and that good results happen from them.
Yeah, it's important to understand our role in all of this. We're not there. This isn't our case. It's not our investigation. We're there to support them and help them build their case, a successful case that can lead to a prosecution to put these guys behind bars or these ladies behind bars and pull these kids out of the horrible situation that they're in and get them into, therapy and help them get on their feet financially.
So, if people want to get involved with SURF or find out more about SURF, how do they go about finding you guys? And what is the best way? If someone listens to this podcast and hears your heart and wants a nonprofit to support that's doing active intervention work, what is the best way to help that nonprofit? The best way to help SURF?
The best way to help us is financially right now to support our missions. The missions are dangerous. The missions are very costly. So go to our website, www.thecirf.org, and make a donation. The monthly donations are huge. That's awesome. If you can make even just a small $10 a month donation, $20 a month donation, $100 a month donation, those are awesome. Those add up, and they also enable us to plan ahead for operations.
I plug that too. I'll plug the same thing with Libertas as well. Those monthly donations for Libertas, we always say that it allows us to create a safe space to where if a girl is vulnerable enough to disclose the most awful thing that's happened to her, that she has a safe place to land, and that we know that we're going to count on resources in the bank next month, and we're able to say, yes, let's take care of you. Welcome to the family. Let's let's make sure that you are safe. I imagine it's the same thing with surf, where you guys want to be able to deploy when called upon. And so if you guys are counting on that money coming in month after month after month with those monthly donations, you're able to do something similar to where if you get a call from the Peruvian police, it's like, hey, we have something going on in Lima in 5 days. Can you be here? That you guys are able to say yes because you guys count on those resources.
Yeah, exactly. As you can imagine, these cases come up suddenly with a lot of urgency. Yeah, typically the police will get a tip call, like a 911 tip call. Hey, there's something suspicious going on in this bar, or this girl looks really young. Can you guys go check it out? They go do their initial confirmations, and then once they find that there are minors being trafficked there, like there's this sense of urgency to get that wrapped up quick, because a lot of our cases we run into, they are moving these girls frequently, and a lot of them end up hospitalized or in psych, because the trauma is unbearable to them. They're suicidal, so there's a lot of urgency there to help as soon as possible.
And in the show notes, we'll add the website, thesurf.org. We'll add some links to some cases you guys have worked on. And then with Alex's, I'll probably add the same link where you guys talk about the award of the Corazón Verde award that you guys got. And Walt, man, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for all you do. Thanks for one thing that I'll just add this, and it just echoes what you've spoken about, is I think sometimes the movies and even some kind of media, even some nonprofits, glamorize undercover work as you're grabbing the 8-year-old girl, you're running out of the door, you're doing all these things, and I had an operator tell me once that works for an NGO who I really respect, and he was like, "This work is not glamorous. It sucks. It's awful. It's awful seeing these victims in their most vulnerable state. It's awful hearing the story. It's awful interacting with these people in these places. It's not glamorous at all, and it shouldn't be glamorized because it's the dogs. It's late nights. It's early mornings. It's evil people. It's dark places." And I think everything you've echoed in this podcast, it validates that. And it goes into talking about what that really looks like, how unglamorous it is. And I imagine a lot of these girls will never know that you were the one that actually helped further along the investigation. A lot of these people probably just think you're another sex tourist that came down looking to exploit their vulnerability. And that living with that sacrifice is not lost on us. It's not lost on me. And I'm glad that you've given us a look into what real undercover looks like, so that people know what they see in the movies or what they hear from different media outlets is not the truth. That what you guys are doing is what it really looks like. You're not doing it for glory. You're not doing it to take a little girl out of a brothel and run out as if you were her Superman. It's dog's work. It's hard. It's expensive. It's long. It's taxing. It's psychologically affects you all. And so I just thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that of what it really looks like to work undercover to further these investigations.
No, you're absolutely right. It takes a toll. And then I'll just close up. Just thank everybody. Thank our donors that are out there for all your support to continue supporting our mission. And thank you, Tyler, for having me on and giving us an opportunity to share some stories and the motivations of why we're in this.